Welcome to the first episode of Beyond the Big Sky. I'm Chad Schearer,
And I'm Wyatt Shear.
and we're going to talk about several different things that involve the outdoors and hopefully make you a better sportsman or sportswoman out in the field.
Since this is episode one, why don't we get a little background? Like, what got you started in the outdoors?
You know, I grew up hunting and fishing with my family. My dad loved to fish, and we were fishing from the time I was in diapers per se, just real young, and grew up doing that. And later on, started to hunt and just fell in love with it.
So, when did you get your first gun and what got you started in the outdoors?
You know, I remember saving my money. I got a job and was working really, really hard. And I was 14 years old when I bought my first gun. It was a Ruger M77 270. And the neat thing about that was I wanted my own gun. The first gun I ever shot a deer with was a Remington Model 788 in 243 just outside of Cascade, Montana. I remember it like it was yesterday. But as I progressed, I wanted something a little bigger, something I could take elk with. And I started saving money, and I almost had enough money. Almost. But I wasn't quite there. And there was a good friend of ours named John Kegereyes. And John said, hey, I just found you a used gun. It has a scope, it has a sling, and it comes with 40 rounds. He said, how much do you have? And guess what? I was $100 short. I didn't have it. I was 14 years old. And he had a construction company, and he said, you know what, Chad? He said, if you work for me during the summer, I will help you get that gun. And that was my first gun I ever purchased.
Do you still have that one?
I still have that one. Now, I've had to re-blue it. I've had to put a new stock on it. I know that there's been over 100 animals taken with it, and got it in my Sherlock safe, and just I don't use it very often anymore, but that's what was my first gun.
So, when did you first go deer hunting? Was it in Montana, or did you do it back when you were a kid in another state, or who got you started in that, and when was it?
You know, my first deer hunt when I was old enough to hunt was in Montana. I'd been on small game hunts in other states, but that was the first time I got to get out there and deer hunt. But that's enough about me. What about you and your first deer hunt?
You know, whenever you took me to Texas for the first time, I think it was 4 or 5.
You were.
I shot my first deer in Texas, and that was a lot different when I grew up compared to when you grew up, because that was your livelihood. And then Walker and I just got to go around and be along our whole lives.
You know, one thing I will remember this as long as I live is you were sitting on my lap, and we had a good friend down there by the name of the Kimball family, and he got us out there. We're sitting in a blind, and this little buck, this little whitetail came in. He was like a spike, and he had little forks on him. And I remember you sitting on my lap with that little CVA 243, and every muscle in your body tightened up. I mean, like tightened up. And then you shot it. And the other thing I remember is you pushed me out of the way trying to get out of that blind because you wanted to get up there.
I wanted to go see it. I wanted to see what I just shot. I was only like 5 years old. So when did you start bow hunting? I know times have changed. Like when I shot my first elk with a bow, just the equipment is tremendously different. Going through your old bows and your old arrows. I mean, the arrows you used to shoot are probably 10 times heavier than the ones we shot now. You could probably use them as a golf club now.
You are correct. These were heavy Easton XX78 arrows.
Were they aluminum arrows?
They were aluminum. We didn't have carbon back then. Man, I'm sounding old, like I came over in a covered wagon or something. But I was 16 years old, and there was a lady by the name of Catherine Porsberg, and she had a business in Great Falls called the Archer's Den. And they had an indoor shooting range, 30 yards indoors, and I was consumed with it. I wanted to bow hunt. Why? Because that's when the elk were bugling. And I thought, man, getting out there, higher chance of it. I didn't know anything about bow hunting. My dad had done a little bit of bow hunting, but not very much. So get out there, and I've got to get a bow. So I talked to Catherine because I went into the Archer's Den. They needed someone to clean up on the shooting range. Big metal building, probably oh man, 120 feet by 80 feet. And so when I was 15, 16 years old, I started cleaning up, sweeping the range, and she'd write my hours down. And I saved up enough money back then, and you could get a compound bow for about 180,
You can't even
$190.
hardly get a pack of arrows nowadays for that.
Exactly. So I got my first bow. It was a Hoyt Ram Hunter 2.
We still have it too.
Still have it. It was a round wheel, didn't really have cams.
I tried pulling that back the other day, and the let off on it, I think there is no let
No,
off.
no such thing as let
You
off.
might as well be shooting a longbow.
Yep, yep. And that was my first bow, and I went out there and I learned so much by all my mistakes that first year. If I heard an elk bugle, I thought I could call them in to me, and I would start cow calling and bugling and all that, and they'd be a mile away. And guess what? They stayed a mile away. But then I learned, and I got to spend some time with other people, and before I knew it, I was calling elk in.
So we all know you are known for shooting a muzzleloader all around the world. When did that start coming in? When did you shoot your first muzzleloader, and how did that evolve?
So I love hunting with a muzzleloader. I've been able to hunt 5 continents with a muzzleloader, go after dangerous game like Cape Buffalo, and it's fun. I love the challenge. It's a one-shot challenge. But early on, there were no inline muzzleloaders. It was the traditional, the cap locks and the flint locks. And my great-great-grandpa, John Schearer, he had a muzzleloader, and it sat on the family farm in Michigan for years. And my Uncle Mike went, and he took it into a gunsmith, and there was a charge that had been in there for years, and they had to bore it out. And I still remember on the farm taking that gun, my great-great-grandpa's muzzleloader, and shooting it on the family farm. And man, I don't remember. I was 10, 11 years old and smelling that smoke, and it intrigued me. And so I shot one, but I never really hunted with it. And then I met a guy by the name of Dudley McGarity, who was at the time the national sales manager for CVA muzzleloaders. When I was speaking at a Bass Pro Shop, the Fall Classics in Springfield, Missouri, and Dudley came up and said, "Hey, you ever hunt with a muzzleloader?" And I'm like, "No, but I like to." And at the time, they had some CVA inlines, and he sent me one up, and I started hunting Montana with it during the rifle season because Montana didn't have a muzzleloader season. And we just got out there and got with it, and I was like, "Man, this is fun." And then I just started hunting a lot with it, and
he'll be here in a couple weeks.
He will.
He's coming up. Maybe we'll have to get him on this and have an episode.
That would be awesome because he knows his muzzleloading, and he's done a lot of things that really helped with the new modern muzzleloaders as far as the Paramounts and 40 cals, and he's a good guy and a good friend.
So you've been guiding my whole life for like 30 years, well before I was born. How did you get that going? I know like all of what happened, but tell a little bit about where you came from, how you became the guide and an outfitter in Montana.
Well, that is an interesting story. I was in high school, and I had to write a paper on interesting jobs to have. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was in high school. And so I thought, you know what would be fun? Let's write a paper on being a hunting and fishing guide. So back then, I know, Wyatt, this is hard to believe, there was not internet.
You couldn't even send a text to him.
You could. I didn't get to type up this. I had a word processor that I had to type it up. A typewriter. I mean, you make a mistake, you had to white out and go over. It was a pain.
That's the olden days.
Yeah, the olden days. So anyway, you sound like I'm 90. That wasn't that long ago. So I had to make phone calls and send letters out to other outfitters, and I found some with some guide schools, and I sent them out asking for information so I could write this paper. So I write the paper. I'm sure I got an A on it. You never know. But I write the paper and don't think anything about it. Graduate high school. I was hunting. I was fishing. I was taking a lot of people. There were some veterans that went to our church that needed meat. I would take them out, help them get their deer, just trying to help different people that could use the meat. And I was like, this is a lot of fun. Well, I started going to college, studying business law, And I'm thinking, you know what? I think I want to be an attorney. Start studying business law. That was the road I was going. I was working at UPS. They were grooming me for management. So I had a couple different options there. And lo and behold, my junior year of college, I get a phone call from a guy named Keith Rush, Lakeview Guest Ranch. And Keith said, "Hey, this is Keith with Lakeview Guest Ranch and Guide School." I'm just sitting there going,
That's a late response.
yeah, it took like 5 years or 6 years.
Must not have been very important.
Well, it was one of these things where once you got to know Keith, back then people would inquire by sending letters because you didn't have internet. And I later visited him at his house, and he had shoe boxes full of all these people that had sent inquiries out.
Somehow your name just got pulled out of the box.
So one day he's going through. I never heard from Chad, pulled it out, called me up and said, "You interested?" I said, "Man, Keith," and this was I still remember, it was early spring. I said, "I'm in college. I'm doing that." He's like, "Well, we've got this guide school." And he's like, "Are you liking what you're doing?" I'm like, "Well, I guess, but I'd always wanted to guide." He's like, "Well, you can do both." I'm like, huh. He said, "I make a deal. Why don't you come down and see me?" So I thought, oh, this would be fun. It was in June, was coming up, and the college finals, national finals rodeo in Bozeman. I'm like, well, we can hit that, go watch a little rodeo. I just started doing a little team roping. Of course, I've never came close to where you're at now, but I thought maybe I wanted to be a team roper, and I learned real quick that I didn't start early enough in life for that. So we go down.
And what was the guide school? What were the people wanting to go learn when they were going there?
So there were people from all over the country that would come. They wanted to learn how to be professional guides, and they would come from all over. Keith had people from all over the country, and they wanted to learn that. Well, I went down to meet him, and I said, "Well, Keith, I know how to elk call. I know how to hunt. I've taken several animals." I said, "The one thing I don't know how to do is to pack horses and mules." I said, "I don't know how to throw a diamond hitch. I don't know how to use a sawbuck or a decker and a saddle, but I want to learn." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, Chad." He said, "You're not like a lot of these other students that don't have any background in it." He said, "I'll make you a deal. You come down and you spend the weekends in the summer." And at the time I was working nights at UPS, so I'd get off at 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday. I would drive down there after being up from 2 in the morning. As soon as I got there, I'd take a nap for about 2 hours. Then we would work on packing horses and different things with horses all that evening. The next day, we'd either do day trips, pack in, or work on stuff. Sunday morning, I'd get up, drive to Dillon, Montana, and go to church. And then I'd drive back and then go to work. And it was a 300-mile one-way trip down there.
So for him, it was pretty smart. He was getting people to come work for him and getting paid for them to work for him.
Yep, he knew it, but he was training them,
man.
And he would give people an opportunity. I do say that about him because not everybody worked out. Some of these people just didn't have a good work ethic. So I started doing that because he said, "I'll tell you what," he said, guide school at that time was around $3,000. He said, "You come down and I will teach you this if you'll guide for me for free for 2 weeks." He said, "We'll do a little barter." He loved to barter. Well, I went down and did that. Well, September came around and he's like, "All right, I'm going to have you, I need to see if you can guide in September." And I worked my school schedule around. So I went down there and he's like, "Okay, your first people coming in, it's a TV show." I said, "Keith, I've never guided anybody in my whole life except just friends." He said, "Yeah, but you're my best elk caller I got down here. I'll send another guy that knows the area a little better than you," because I knew the area. I'd spent all summer there. He said, "In case you need any help."
So that had to make you a little nervous.
I was totally nervous. I'd never been on TV, let alone outdoor TV, and it was Midwest Outdoors out of Chicago, which was a very popular show. So we go in and get all ready first morning, saddle up before daylight. We start riding up the mountain. I still could take you to the trail we were going. We get all the way up there. The sun's just popping up. I said, "All right, let's stop right here on this little meadow edge," and tied the horses up. I hit a bugle, and boom, a bull fired up right away. And I was shocked, to say the least, that it happened that quick. I said, get the cameras, get the guy. We run down 100 yards. We set up. I hit the cow call, and this bull comes running in.
Had that guy ever went elk hunting, or was this his first time?
First time.
So he was nervous too.
He was big time nervous.
So you had two nervous people, you and the hunter.
Exactly. So I hear this elk. I lay down because I'm looking, because this bull's coming quick, and here he comes. Steps out 20 yards, and I watch the guy draw. And he holds his bow back on full draw, and the bull's standing there. 20 yards.
Still no release on those old bows, probably.
Broadside. He had a release, actually. It was one of the first releases back then. And he's holding it, and I'm sitting there, pull the trigger. And I'm watching his arm shaking, and I'm like, what's going on? This bull's right here. I'm a rookie guide, but I'm like, I'm thinking you should be shooting right now. And he finally goes, and lets off. And the bull takes off. And I'm like, what happened? He was like,
Little bull fever.
He had bull fever. I'd never seen anybody with bull fever like that. And he was hooked on elk hunting at that point, and I was hooked on guiding. I learned a lot on that trip. I learned that he had metal in his leg from a surgery prior to the hunt, and you can't jump off rocky cliffs and go after elk when somebody has metal in their legs. And he told me, hey, you need to ask if I've got anything going on here so I can make it. So I learned a lot on that first hunt, and fell in love with it.
So you went from that first hunt. How did you transition that to outfitting on your own?
So in Montana at that time, you had to guide for 100 days or have some guide school experience, and there was some different parameters you could have or buy someone out. And so I started guiding, and I was taking any vacation I had, and at the time I had 4 or 5 weeks vacation from UPS, and I would take all my vacation, work school around it, and I was like, man, I'm just getting as much time in, get my days built up. Well, around that time and around the early 90s, the Montana Board of Outfitters said we're going to put a moratorium on outfitter licenses. I'm in college. I don't have hardly any money. I'd save $10,000 up just by working hard and saving. And I was like, what am I going to do? And my Grandpa Schearer, always said, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And so I went for it. So I was 24 years old. I had $10,000. I figured that I would have enough money to make my truck payment and survive for 18 months. So I went on the road. I drove down to Florida, and I went to different places, different events, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation events, and just started talking to people.
So did you already have your license at that time?
I got my license. I was one of the youngest people to ever get their license in Montana.
And that was probably a lot different. I know you've talked about it before. The study guide back then compared to now, there was none.
There was no study guide.
There was no Google, YouTube to figure out questions. That was all pure knowledge.
There was 50 or 60 questions per section, 300 questions, and no way to study. And they had all kinds of questions like, and you would know this from horseshoe, but is a standard horseshoe nail larger than or smaller than a city head horseshoe nail?
Not the average outfitter probably knows that off the top of his head.
No, but that was for the horse segment. Then you had to name all the segments on pack saddles. They gave you a whole picture of it. You had to name everything from the britchins to the D-ring, everything on that.
When you got your outfitting license, was it just for hunting, or did you have to do another segment for fishing and other outfitting?
You had to do segments for fishing, and they would ask you questions about certain things, the 3 stages of an insect. You had to know that. You had to know different rivers. And it was tough back then because they would ask you questions about Rock Creek over in Missoula. Well, if you're not fishing Rock Creek, you wouldn't have that local knowledge, but they wanted you to be really diversified. You had to know the first aid stuff. You had to know firearms, and then you had to know all the state laws on it. So I was so thankful when I passed it. Then I got inspected.
Was that your first try? You got on your first try?
I passed 3 of the 5 sections on my first try, and then went back and finished. I missed it by just a few points, and I went back and finished it. You could retake the sections you failed. So
It's impressive for back then not having a study guide. It's not like nowadays where they give you a book and you can study and figure it all
they
out.
give you a book and there's not as many questions. So it was pretty interesting back then. But I'm glad I did it. And so I went on the road to get clients. I got 6 big game clients that first fall.
What was the price back then compared to now?
Man, I don't even remember. It was probably getting $2,000 to $2,500 for a deer hunt compared to now. A lot of those hunts are $6,000 to $8,000, and so I get this. I got 6 clients. Woohoo! I'm excited. We're gonna start, and I started in my stomping grounds.
If you're getting $2,000 a piece, you're only making $12,000 off 6 clients.
That's gross.
That's before you pay your leases, your vehicles, your camps, everything.
Yep.
So you're probably making barely anything back then.
Well, so then I'm like, okay, I got to do something in the summer. I need summer business. So I went and so I had some fall people booked, but I didn't have any summer business.
So how'd you get summer people? Did you reach out and contact other people, or?
Well, I got this great idea. You always got to have these great ideas. So I went at the time, like I said, there was no internet. So I went and we did have copy machines. So I got a color copier and we took some photos of stuff we did, some trips I've personally done, from fly fishing, some horseback riding, some different things. And I'm like, well, who's coming through Montana? How do I get some of these tourists? Well, I was like, all these musicians are coming through for the state fair, and Calgary Stampede was going on up in Alberta and
Great
Cheyenne.
Falls is kind of a place where people cross through in the summer.
They were going from Calgary down to Cheyenne or Cheyenne to Calgary. So I'm like, okay, so how do I get a hold of these musicians? Well, I had met somebody at WSB Radio down in Nashville when I was there for the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and they worked for the radio station. So I called them up, said, how do you do that? And they said, well, who do you want to know? Because you're not going to get a hold of them, but you get a hold of their road managers. So I got all the lists of road managers, and I sent out 12 letters. Okay, we'll see what's going to happen. And I went and got a cell phone because cell phones are just coming out. I need a cell phone for them to get a hold of me because I was busy. I was out there doing all these different things.
It's not like nowadays where you could go Google someone's contact info, email them,
send them
on Instagram.
Yep, send them a message. Yep, exactly. So all of a sudden my phone rings, and it was Robbie Kukula. And he's like, hey, this is Robbie. I'm like, hey, Robbie, how are you? Yeah, I'm with Tim McGraw. I'm like, you're with who? Tim McGraw? He goes, yeah. Then I'd send him a letter out. He's like, Tim's got 2.5 down days between concerts. He's like, we got the band. We've got guys from CMT. He wants to come out, wants to fish. He wants to shoot some guns, hang out in camp, have a big campfire. He's like, can you do it? I'm like, oh, yeah, no problem. I said, when are you guys going to be here? He's like, we'll be there in about 48 hours.
Not a lot of preparing time.
I didn't have tents. I had some tents, some wall tents that I'd borrowed and used. I had some different things that I can use, but we were using a house for our base camp. It's like, what am I going to do? So I called buddies. We got out there with weed eaters. We put a camp in, got the grocery. I was so tired by the time they got here. There's 12 of them. We had some of the CMT guys there, and it was awesome. We went out, had a great time. In the meantime, my phone rings again, and it was Henry Paul, lead singer for the band Blackhawk. He's like, hey, Chad, my son, he's on the bus with us. He needs to get off the bus. Is there anything you can do with him? I'm like, oh, we can take him fishing, take him in the mountains. So I had Tim for a couple days, and as soon as he was done, then I had this young person we were taking fishing.
It's quite impressive they just come and do that. I mean, with not having a background and lots of clients before, that they would just come and trust that you'd have it all set up.
Well, it's all about talking the talk and knowing and building that reputation. And what was so cool is he hung out with us for 2 days, Tim did, and then he had a concert in Great Falls at the Four Seasons Arena, and they went, that's what it was called back then. There's about 6,500 people, I think, at it. And he got up on stage, and word got out in the newspaper and radio that Tim was in the area because his bus was parked there. And word got out that he was up in the mountains with somebody. So Tim got up on stage and said, yeah, I hear you folks been been talking about us being in Montana. He said, I've been with Montana's best outfitter, Central Montana Outfitters, Chad Schearer. We've been hanging out up in the high woods, having a great time, and just went on and did that.
That probably blew up right there.
It blew up right then. Then, if that wasn't enough, Henry Paul gets up a night later, and I'd taken his kid out, caught fish and that, says the same thing. My son's been doing this, and so all of a sudden we were outfitter to the stars. Everybody in Great Falls, when people would call, hey, you need to go with Chad. We ended up with the band from Alabama. We ended up with Trace Adkins, Sons of the Desert. And then it turned into some stuff with NASCAR. Richard Childress came up, and then his two grandsons, who Austin and Ty, which Austin won the Daytona 500, I think, last year, the year before. And so it just took off, and we worked really hard, and that was 30 years ago, and we're still enjoying.
I mean, that's better than any ads on Facebook that you could have got back in the day.
You know, it was priceless. And Tim actually came back with us several times and would bring guys like his dad, the baseball player Tug McGraw. He brought Mark Colley with him, and Mark had to leave a day early from the trip to go back to promote a fundraiser deal he was on. And he went back and had a interview with Crook and Chase, which the TNN network back in the day was really big. He went in there and talked about hanging out with us up here in Montana, and then Tim with Country Weekly, they did a story. He said, where's your favorite place to visit or relax? And he said, in the mountains of Montana. So there's just a lot of real positive things, and that kind of got things going in the guiding and outfitting, and then it really took off. There was one key thing that really blew it off the roof.
My mother.
When I married your mom. Yep.
So we talked about clients, how you got your start. That kind of blew up and got you a lot of clients and filled your camps for many years. So if you weren't guiding or outfitting, what would be your favorite animal to hunt?
Oh, man. My canned answer is whatever the next hunt is. And for me, I don't care if it's hunting prairie dogs in the backyard to coyotes or going over to Mozambique. I love elk hunting.
If you could pick one, though.
Oh, man.
Just one.
I don't know if I can do that. Can I do one North America, one Africa? Okay. It would probably be elk in North America, and it would be buffalo in Africa.
If you could hunt elk, would you be hunting them with a bow, muzzleloader, rut, non-rut, peak rut? What would you pick?
Yes.
Everything.
It doesn't matter to me. I love hunting with a bow. I love hunting with a muzzleloader. I love hunting with a rifle. And that's the one thing that I enjoy. There are some people say, oh, I just got a bow hunt. I just got a muzzleloader. I'll do whatever. Give me a pistol. I don't care. I love going after them, and I love the challenge. I would tell you one of the funnest things, though, is to do it with the family and doing it together. And I remember back when you were probably 8 or 9, and we had you and Walker together, and I said, I'll shoot any bull that you two can call in. You're going to do all the calling. And
it took a couple days.
It did. And one was cow call, one was bugling. You remember?
Walker cow called, I bugled. I remember we still have it on footage whenever we'd sit back in the trees.
Yep.
And we didn't know when to call or what to call. So you would tell us, Walker, if he gave a number 1, that was for a cow call. And if you put your 2 fingers up, that was for a bull call. So we just listened to you. You told us when and what, and we did it and called you in a nice little bull.
Shot a 5-point bull on camera. That was probably, it wasn't my biggest bull, but that was my best bull ever. And then I saw it, arrow complete pass through at 42 yards. I watched the bull run up the hill, and I saw him tip over, but I just let you guys.
Made us work to try to track it. When you already knew it was dead, we could have just walked up to it.
But you learned a lot there, and that was such a
Well, learned just as much walking up to it.
No, not exactly.
So you talked about your favorite thing to hunt. What about favorite place? One destination, if you could just constantly go back to that destination.
I would just tell you Montana. I live here, but there's so much variety. Like last year, you drew that moose tag. There's so many different species of animals out there, and it's the home court advantage, I say. But there's enough diversity here. and so many species, 10 different big game species in Montana that I love it. I love the birds. I love the waterfowl.
I think Montana's fun too because you have such a long season
Yep.
that it's not you go months and months without anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go all summer fishing, then you can go into bird hunting, then you can go into archery, then there's a little break in between you can bird hunt, then you got turkeys, then you go into rifle. You can hunt and fish all year round. There's not really an off season.
There isn't. Now, what about you?
You know, I'd have to say those moose hunts are pretty fun. I've been able to kill 2 of them, one in the Yukon in like August, and that was just a thrill on horseback, everything, and then one last year in Montana. There was only one tag and I drew it, which was pretty good luck.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. What about favorite place to go?
I don't know. It's hard to beat here because you can hunt right out of your home, and there's so many animals you can go after.
Yep.
When you can go and look for deer, elk, moose, antelope, I mean, you never run out.
No, it's awesome.
So who would be your favorite people to hunt with?
Favorite people to hunt with definitely would be Marcia, your mom, and you and Walker. And now I'm just telling you that there's some girls in the family, Bree and Keely. I tell you, Keely last year, that was so fun when she came back from college and was out there. It was cold, and you'd been watching this one deer and put her
Right in the backyard, too.
It was right in the backyard.
It was cold and miserable, and she said, I do not want to have to walk in the cold and get nasty out there and just be miserable. And she literally, we put her on the sled, and I pulled her down the hill, and I had a mat laid out. I had a sandbag, everything.
No, it was
200
great.
yards, one shot.
And that deer was about to jump the fence, and she shot it. I mean, like, if she would have waited one more second, it could have been a little bit different. And
nailed it too. About died on top of the fence.
Yeah, she did. She got that, and then Bree got her first deer in Hawaii. So to me now, don't get me wrong, I love pulling the trigger and I love hunting, but I love taking you guys out, and I love taking first timers out, and especially on archery elk. Having that bull come screaming in, I helped some kids last year and did some calling for them, and that to me is what
just to see the excitement on their face too.
Oh,
and they get the bull fever just like your first client.
Yeah,
lock up and everything.
Now your first elk though, I was in the Yukon on a moose hunt.
That was my first elk with a bow.
Yes, that is true because you've taken several elk, but your first one with a bow, you were with Uncle Linnell, as we call him, and he was running camera. And Mom, I was gone. Walker was up there with me, and Walker was running camera. And you're like, I got to go. We're going to try this.
And they were bugling, too.
And I'm telling you what, you were 12, 13? 13 years old to hunt elk with a bow. That's impressive.
It was kind of crazy, too, because we sat at this watering hole, and I had a cow and a bull tag, and this cow came into like 30 yards. I thought, oh, easy. I'm just going to smoke it. I pulled back. I did not even come close to hitting it. I was so shaking, everything. I mean, for a little cow, didn't even have antlers.
Yeah.
And I probably shot 5 feet over her back. Then this bull came in. He's just a spike. He came in, and I'm sitting there in the grass behind the water hole, and he came to 5 feet. I mean, like, close. Then he backed up, and then he, sneezed and, snorted.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to jump out of my skin.
Well, on camera, you did jump.
Yeah, of course. It has to be on camera so everybody can see. I jumped. Then he went out like 52 yards. And then he was going away, and I didn't even think about it. Pulled back, put my pin on him. He went 20 yards and fell over.
I was impressed. I couldn't believe it when you called me on the satellite phone. I was checking in at night, and you told me the story. It blew me away. That was impressive.
Then Mom came over, and the nice thing was drug it right down the hill.
Yep.
Put it right in the truck. Didn't even have to quarter it.
Anytime you can get an elk out without quartering it, that's amazing because that doesn't happen very often.
So non-family members, who would you probably pick if you could go on a hunt with?
For guiding, hanging out?
To go on like your favorite hunt, which is a friend or someone that is not family that you could take.
Oh, man, that is tough. That's a question that I wasn't ready for. You know, there's several people.
Or a couple in mind that you think.
Yeah, I would tell you one, Dudley McGarity, who he was CEO for CVA.
Who sent you your first muzzleloader you just talked about.
Yep. And I've called several elk in for him. I still remember a bull he shot years ago. A really good bull with his longbow. He's a longbow
I think
hunter.
we need to save that story for when he's here.
We will.
That'd be
but
a good story.
I'll tell you, he is really fun. Another one, Nate Treadaway, who was later on the CEO at Bergar and CVA. And he and I had a lot of great adventures together. We went over to Mozambique last year. We have hunted Alaska. And yeah, it's business, but the friendships. And then, of course, Michael McMichael, Power Belt Bullets.
He's one of a kind.
He is so fun. And you put all those guys together in one camp, and it's crazy, especially Dudley and Michael.
Some of the bear
laugh.
stories and the monkeys and stuff in Africa. Might have to get him on one with Dudley.
We will definitely need to do that. We might have to see if he can come over when Dudley's here and do something like that, because there's several great memories. I got to fish with Ed Rice. Ed's no longer with us. He passed away last year. He was in the Fly Fishing Hall of Fame, and he was great guy to fish with. Other people like Boots Reynolds was great, just cowboy cartoonist, and several different people over the years. But there's a lot of good friends out there, and I just love getting out there. Ryan Fowler, buddy of ours, I got to hunt with last year and spent some time with him, and Darren Newsom over at Armscourt. There's so many of them, because each person is fun just to share a hunting camp with and to spend that time, and you can learn. Even though I've hunted so much, you can learn a little bit from everybody.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a great start to podcast number 1, and hopefully we can get this one out there to you guys, and in a week have another one coming in.
Well, Wyatt, I've enjoyed it. This has been a dream of yours, and you've been talking about it, and finally you said, I'm buying the equipment, we're doing it. So here we are. So episode number 1, Beyond the Big Sky. We hope you've enjoyed it.